They say you never forget the moment your heart breaks. Not the loud kind with shouting and slammed doors, but the quiet kind. The kind that leaves behind an echo instead of a wound. For me, it was a Tuesday. Cold outside. Takeout on the coffee table, unopened. Brandon pacing the living room with that look he always got when he was trying to say something awful in a gentle way. I already knew. We'd been together for 3 years, long enough for habits to form and silences to gain weight. Long enough to survive rough patches, quiet seasons, even that time his job let him go, and he nearly gave up. I was there for all of it. Held him when he cried, paid the rent when he couldn't, told him he was enough when he didn't believe it. But lately, his smile had felt like a formality. The way he kissed me, distracted, distant, already elsewhere. Still, I waited for him to speak. "Jesse," he said, finally turning toward me. "I need to be honest with you." I gave him a small nod. "Okay." He ran his hands through his hair, the same way he did when he was nervous, or lying. "I love you. I do. But I want more than this." My throat tightened. "This apartment, this life, it's fine, but it's not who I am anymore," he continued. "I want to travel. I want luxury. I want to stop worrying about every little bill or vacation or bottle of wine." He paused, waiting for me to argue. I didn't. He sighed. "There's someone else." That stung. Not because I didn't expect it, but because he said it so quietly. Like it wasn't betrayal, just an update. "His name's Dominic. You might have seen him in the news. He owns a few companies. He's kind, generous. He understands where I want to go." I looked at him. Really looked. He was already halfway, out the door, emotionally packed and ready. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was selfish. That love isn't measured in champagne flutes or private jets. That I had given him the best of me. Not the richest, but the truest. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up, walked over to the counter, and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was shaking. "Okay," I said. Brandon blinked. "Okay? You want more than this?" I repeated. "So go find it." He stared at me for a long time, searching for something. Maybe anger, maybe heartbreak, maybe permission. But I just stood there, still, silent. He left that night. Took his things, left his key on the table, like it was some kind of closure. And just like that, 3 years became a ghost that haunted my apartment. The couch still smelled like his cologne. His favorite mug sat unwashed in the sink. I found one of his hoodies in the laundry hamper a week later, and all I could do was sit on the floor and hold it like it meant something. I watched him change from a distance, online articles, tagged photos. His Instagram transformed overnight. Champagne flutes clinking on yachts, designer clothes, Dom's hand on his back like a possession. And still, I said nothing. Because what would I say? That I missed the nights we fell asleep with the TV still on. That I missed him humming while brushing his teeth, or the way he always added too much garlic to my pasta. He had made his choice. And I wasn't part of it. People asked about him. Friends tiptoed around his name like it might break me. But I smiled, nodded, said we'd grown apart. The truth was simpler. He left because he thought I wasn't enough, and the cruelest part? I let him believe it. It started with a photo. A glimmering flute of champagne held in Brandon's hand, posted to his story with a view of the Eiffel Tower behind him. The caption read, "Midnight in Paris. Dreams do come true." The camera angle was careful, artistic, just the right amount of luxury without showing the man sitting across from him. But I knew. Dominic Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Holdings, billionaire tech mogul, always in crisp suits, always smiling like he already owned the room, because he probably did. I stared at the post for longer than I care to admit, my thumb hovering over the mute button like that would make any difference, but I didn't mute him. Not yet. I watched it all unfold. Brandon's page transformed overnight. Gone were the blurry selfies, the brunch plates, the occasional gym thirst trap. Now it was penthouses and yachts, tailored jackets, limousines, weekend getaways in Santorini, ski resorts in Switzerland, helicopter tours over Manhattan, always with that careful cropping. Brandon in the foreground, Dominic in the blurred background, a shoulder here, a glass raised there, a private jet staircase just out of frame. I watched, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't not. Every photo was a reminder, not just that he had left, but that he had traded up. And worse, he looked happy. That was the part that cut deepest. He was glowing in a way he hadn't in our final months together. His smile reached his eyes again. He wore his ambition like a tailored coat, fitting him perfectly in the world he always dreamed of. The world I had never been part of. I'd scroll through the comments, where followers fawned over his glow-up, and asked if he was dating the Dominic Blackwell. Brandon never confirmed, but he didn't deny it either. The silence was a performance in itself. One night, wine in hand, I found myself staring at a post from his birthday dinner. Some rooftop bar overlooking the city, string lights glowing, a gift box wrapped in Cartier red sitting at his place setting. It didn't used to be like this. I remember a different birthday. The year he turned 26. He was broke, jobless, and so depressed he didn't get out of bed for 2 days. I'd scraped together what little I had, bought him a used leather jacket off Facebook Marketplace, and surprised him with a picnic in the park. We ate gas station sushi and drank $5 wine. He cried and told me it was the best birthday he'd ever had. That jacket hung in my closet for over a year after he left. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. He had nothing then. No job, no direction. He'd been couch surfing before we got serious, living out of a duffel bag and a fading dream of working in entertainment. When the depression hit hard, I carried us both. Grocery runs, rent, laundry, therapy appointments he never went to. I stayed, I never complained. I just wanted him to believe in himself the way I believed in him. And now, he posted luxury watch, unboxings, and inspirational quotes about manifesting abundance. There's something uniquely cruel about watching someone become the best version of themselves for someone else. I didn't just lose Brandon. I lost the man I'd helped build. For a while, the pain just sat there, like a low buzz under my skin. I worked, I ate, I slept. I went through the motions of a life that had moved on without me. But over time, something inside me began to shift. It wasn't just pain anymore, not sadness, not grief. It was sharper now. A thought began to creep in. Slow, quiet, insistent. He never even knew who I really was. Brandon had seen the surface. The modest apartment, the second-hand furniture, the quiet evenings, the homemade pasta. He'd assumed that's all there was. That I was just some decent guy with an okay job and a small life. But he didn't know what was behind it. The portfolio. The silent investments. The startup I'd co-founded in college that had just signed a 7-figure acquisition deal. The trust fund I never touched. The estate I'd inherited from my grandfather and kept off the books. The wealth I never flaunted because I wanted love, not opportunists. He didn't ask. He never cared to look deeper. He thought he was leaving modesty behind, but he was walking away from an empire. And for the first time in months, I let myself feel it. Not heartbreak, not shame. Power. Not the kind that shows up in headlines or champagne flutes. The quiet kind. The kind that waits. I didn't want him back. Not anymore. But I wanted something else. Closure? No. Control. I wanted the part of me that had been left behind. The part that believed I was less than. Just because I didn't come with a yacht and a bodyguard. Brandon wanted more? I would show him exactly what he walked away from, and I wouldn't need to say a word. The building sat tucked away in the quiet part of the city. Discreet, understated, just how we liked it. No logos, no signs, just glass, steel, and silence. Scanned my access card at the side door, the same way I had for the last 8 years. The scanner beeped, the door clicked open, and I stepped into the headquarters of the company I had co-founded when I was 23. Virentech, an AI architecture firm that had started in my college dorm room with 3 maxed-out credit cards, a busted laptop, and a ridiculous dream. We'd just cleared the final phase of a multi-year merger. The IPO was weeks away. And once the paperwork settled, I'd hold majority shares of a company that had been appraised at just under $1 billion. No one outside my inner circle knew, and I'd kept it that way. Intentionally. Because once, years ago, I'd fallen for someone who smiled too sweet, touched too quickly, and left as soon as the money got complicated. She hadn't loved me. She'd loved the security I offered, the illusion. After that, I made a promise to myself. If someone was going to love me, they were going to love the version of me who ordered takeout 3 nights a week and wore hoodies with holes in the sleeves. Not the man who held quiet power, behind closed boardrooms. Brandon had never asked about my work. Not really. Not beyond the surface level. As long as rent was paid, vacations happened once a year, and dinner showed up warm, he didn't dig, and I never offered. Maybe part of me had hoped that was a sign he was different. But now I saw it for what it was. He hadn't loved me. He'd loved what he thought I could give him. Until someone else offered more. That realization sat heavy in my chest as I stepped into the private conference room upstairs. "Elena's waiting," the assistant said, nodding toward the frosted glass door. Elena Moreau had been my closest friend since college. Smart as hell. Sharp enough to terrify most corporate lawyers. She'd seen me through my broke years, my panic attacks, and every reckless idea I'd ever had. She was also the only person who ever called me out without flinching. She stood as I entered, arms crossed, dark curls pulled back tight. "You're late," she said, tossing a folder onto the table. I stopped for a coffee. "You look like a man who hasn't slept in 3 weeks." "I haven't," I admitted, dropping into the chair across from her. She slid the folder toward me. Inside, financial statements, board updates, the final lock-in terms for the IPO. "This is it," she said. "You're about to be a publicly celebrated genius. You've got wealth people kill for, a company they envy, and a future that's locked and loaded." I exhaled, scanning the page. Numbers didn't lie. "You don't look happy," she said. I leaned back. "I'm just thinking." "About him?" I didn't respond. Elena's voice softened. "Jesse, you don't owe that man your thoughts." "I know." He walked out. "You didn't chase him. You don't need to punish yourself for that." "I'm not punishing myself," I said quietly. "I'm trying to understand." She raised an eyebrow. "I keep wondering," I continued. "If he would have stayed if I'd told him who I really was, if he'd known about the company, the investments, the apartment I keep downtown that's bigger than Dominic's penthouse." Elena leaned forward. "Don't confuse staying with loving, Jesse. If he'd stayed for your money, you still would have been alone." The words landed hard. She was right. Brandon had loved comfort, presentation, fantasy. He'd fallen in love with the next level, and when he thought I wasn't it, he jumped ship. He never asked what I wanted. Never saw the nights I was up till 3 a.m. on conference calls with Beijing, or the stress buried in my silence. He thought I was boring, unambitious. He had no idea who I was, but he was about to. Elena slid another folder across the table. "You remember Dominic Blackwell?" I looked up. She smirked. "Thought you might. His company just acquired one of our competitors. I've been digging. It's leveraged to hell. All image, no cash flow. Flashy. Shaky." I blinked. "You think it's vulnerable, I think," she said, folding her hands together. "That if you wanted to make a move, now would be the time." I stared down at the folder, pulse quickening. I hadn't said it aloud, not even to her. But something inside me had shifted in the last few weeks. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was awake. I'd spent so long trying to live quietly, to hide from the noise of power, of money, of attention. But I was done hiding. If Brandon needed to see value stamped in dollar signs, luxury cars, and prestige events to understand what he lost, then I was going. To show him, not for him. Not really, for me. Because I wasn't the man he walked away from. I was the man he never took the time to see. Revenge isn't loud. It isn't fireworks and shouting matches or dramatic exits. Real revenge is subtle. Measured. It's the click. of a pen in a silent boardroom. The moment your name appears on a ledger in an office someone thought they controlled. The kind that smiles politely across a gala floor and doesn't flinch. It took Elena and me 3 weeks to set up the shell. Firm, clean, airtight, untraceable. Based out of Luxembourg with a name so boring even auditors would fall asleep reading it. Through it, I began acquiring shares in Blackwell Apex Group, Dominic's holding company. Small at first, then strategically larger once we found the cracks. And there were plenty of cracks. The entire empire was built on illusion. Aggressive. Loans, brand deals, PR stunts, and shell investments designed to inflate value but not produce cash flow. It looked good on camera, and it dazzled newcomers. But I'd seen enough companies rot from the inside to recognize the signs. All I had to do was wait. Let the structure weaken while I quietly bought in. While I was doing that, Brandon texted me. Brandon. Hey, stranger. Brandon. You still at that old apartment? Brandon. I passed by yesterday. Made me think of you. Hope you're doing okay. I stared at the messages for a full 10 minutes before replying. Me. Hey, good to hear from you. Things are good, busy. Hope you're well too. Polite, neutral, nothing more. He waited a day, then tried again. Brandon. We should catch up sometime. No pressure. Just talk. I didn't reply. Because the truth was, I didn't want to talk. Not now. Not yet. I wasn't done building. When the invitation to the Golden Horizon Gala arrived, I almost laughed. It was one of Dominic's flagship events, the kind of black tie soiree designed to show off his latest ventures and rub elbows. With elite investors, there would be media, flashbulbs, champagne, carefully placed articles the next morning in Forbes and GQ about Dominic's vision, his empire, his perfect protege boyfriend. It was a show, and I was ready to make an appearance. Elena called me the night before. You sure you're up for this? I'm not going to cause a scene, I said. I'm just going to be seen. She exhaled. Just remember, you're not the underdog anymore. I hung up and looked in the mirror for a long time. Gone was the man who'd stood in the kitchen watching Brandon walk away with nothing but a crumpled heart and a glass of water in hand. I was still that man, yes, but now I wore my scars like steel under silk. The night of the gala, I arrived at the Grand Ritz with my date, Noah, an investor from Paris I'd met through Elena. He wasn't a lover, not exactly. But he was charming, handsome, and perfectly at ease with the attention we drew when we stepped into the ballroom. Everyone is looking at you, he whispered as we passed the first wave of cameras. No, I said, eyes scanning. The crowd. They're about to, and then I saw them. Dominic stood at the center of the room, sleek in black tie, surrounded by his orbit of executives and admirers. Brandon stood just behind him, hand draped lightly on his arm, dressed to perfection in a midnight blue tux that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He looked exactly like the kind of man he'd always wanted to be until he saw me. His smile faltered mid-sentence. His hand dropped from Dominic's sleeve. His eyes widened, not in recognition, but disbelief. I didn't flinch. Just walked past him with Noah, murmuring something that made my date laugh. The sound, light and effortless. Brandon turned to follow my path with his eyes, his mouth slightly open. He looked as if someone had dragged the floor out from under him. I stopped by the champagne bar and took a glass, letting the bubbles rise in silence before I turned and caught his gaze again. This time, I smiled. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. Just enough to let him know I saw him. He approached minutes later, threading through the crowd like he was walking against a tide. His steps were too fast, his breath uneven. Jesse, he said, just above the noise. I turned, slow and elegant. Brandon. You look amazing. I do, I said simply. He blinked. I didn't know you'd be here. I'm on the donor list, I replied, sipping. My company is one of the night's sponsors. He blinked again, slower this time. Your company? Virentech, I said lightly. We're merging with one of Dominic's satellite subsidiaries. I'm sure he mentioned it. Brandon's mouth opened, then closed. The color drained slightly from his face. Noah returned just then, setting a second glass on the table beside me. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his French accent soft and practiced. "Just catching up with an old friend," I said smoothly. Brandon nodded stiffly. "Right, of course." He didn't move for a moment. He just stood there, stunned, unsteady. He looked at me like he'd seen a ghost, but I wasn't the one who disappeared. He had. And now, I was just the reminder. "Enjoy your evening," I said, turning back toward Noah. I didn't look back as I walked away, but I felt Brandon watching me. Every step, every breath. Later that night, I stood near the mezzanine, watching the room swirl below. Power players shaking hands, photographers snapping moments that would fill tomorrow's headlines. Dominic was smiling for the cameras, but his jaw was tight. He'd already heard the news. By morning, he'd know the full extent. My shell company now controlled a critical stake in one of his most profitable subsidiaries, and I was quietly consolidating the rest. I sipped my champagne, watching him mask discomfort with charm. That was the thing about people like Dominic. They thought they were always the biggest shark in the water until someone swam quietly beneath them, and people like Brandon, they thought they were upgrading their life, when really they were trading gold for glitter. But this wasn't revenge. This was clarity. For once, I didn't want him to hurt. I just wanted him to understand. It didn't happen with headlines or handcuffs. It happened in boardrooms. Over the course of 72 hours, everything Dominic had built, or rather, pretended to build, began to fracture. We started with Apex Biotech, one of his more visible holdings. Through our shell firm, we executed a hostile acquisition after Apex's board sided with us, thanks to the dirt Elena had unearthed. Years of inflated valuations, shady vendor contracts, and whispered threats of SEC violations. It took just one domino to fall. The rest followed with mechanical inevitability. Dominic tried to bluff, tried to smear us with press releases and media spin, but every interview sounded thinner than the last. His hands were tied with debt, leverage stacked on leverage, and we were liquid. By the time he realized I was the one behind it, it was too late. Elena called me the morning the news broke. Her voice was crisp, efficient, triumphant. "It's done," she said. "The Blackwell Trust froze his assets this morning. The board's voting to replace him as CEO by end of week. The SEC's sniffing now. He's finished." I didn't say anything for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. This was never about revenge. It was about returning to myself. The first time I saw Brandon after the collapse was unplanned. I was leaving the Ritz after a meeting with one of our tech partners, and he was sitting on the stone steps just outside the side entrance, hunched over, blazer wrinkled, collar open. His phone was in his hand, but his eyes were fixed on the pavement like it could explain what happened. I almost walked past him. Almost. But then he looked up. And for the first time, I didn't see the version of Brandon I had memorized. The bright smile, the curated elegance, the ambition masked as charm. I saw the boy I met years ago. A little too lost, a little too greedy for the world to love him. His eyes widened as I approached. "Jesse, wait." I stopped, but I didn't sit. He stood quickly, brushing his hands against his pants, like he could smooth out what was already unraveling. "We talk?" he asked. His voice cracked a little on the second word. I glanced at my watch. "I have 5 minutes." That seemed to rattle him. I used to drop everything for him. He knew it. "I didn't know," he said. "About you. About the company. About any of it." "I know. I was stupid." I tilted my head. "No. You were hungry. There's a difference." He exhaled. "I made a mistake." I raised an eyebrow. "Which part?" He looked down. "Leaving you." The words sat between us for a long moment. I watched them settle, weightless and late. "I thought I was upgrading," he continued. "Quieter now. I thought Dominic could give me the life I always wanted. The kind of life you didn't seem interested in." "And now?" I asked. His eyes met mine. "Now I don't have anything. I'm back in a one-bedroom walk-up with a leaky sink. My name's on a list of people to avoid in every investor circle. No one answers my calls. I nodded slowly. That must be hard. He stepped closer. But you're still standing. You built something real. You are something real. There was a time when those words would have meant everything to me, when I would have given anything to hear them. But now, they were too late. I don't want your money, he added quickly, or a job, or a second chance. I just wanted to say I was wrong. I looked at him. Really looked. He was smaller now, not physically, but emotionally. Like the suit didn't quite fit anymore. Like the glitter had finally dulled. I thought I'd feel triumphant in this moment, that I'd smile and walk away and feel the satisfying burn of justice complete. But all I felt was clarity. You chose him, I said softly. When I had nothing to prove. When I stood in front of you, as I was, and asked you to believe in me anyway, he nodded slowly. And now, I took a breath. You have nothing I want. His face crumpled for a second before he could stop it. He nodded again, this time shakier. Goodbye, Brandon. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked away, heels clicking against marble, the sun warm against my back. 2 days later, I received an envelope at my office. No return address. Inside was the old leather jacket I'd given Brandon for his 26th birthday. Folded neatly. Clean. No note, just the jacket. I placed it on the edge of my desk for a moment, ran my fingers across the worn sleeve, and then stood. There was a charity auction that night. I had somewhere to be. The ballroom was lit in soft amber with chandeliers like frozen fire overhead. I stood near the edge of the crowd, drink in hand, watching people orbit conversations like planets in tailored suits. Across the room, someone new stood beside me. Charming, handsome, eyes bright with curiosity but unshaped by loss. We talked about art, architecture, old jazz records, not love, not yet, but something softer. I didn't need closure anymore, because the truth was, I'd never lost anything. I had only outgrown it. The first time I loved Brandon, it was messy. It was cheap. Wine in mismatched glasses. It was whispered apologies between part-time jobs, late rent, and ramen noodles. It was fragile in the way only real things are, because it had to survive without polish, without safety nets. I loved him when neither of us had anything, and he left the moment someone offered him everything. I used to think that kind of loss would destroy me. But it didn't. It refined me. It had been 6 months since the collapse, since the press swarmed Dominic's fall, since Brandon's face quietly vanished from the glossy magazines and influencer spreads he once craved so desperately. I hadn't seen him since the day he told me he made a mistake, until tonight. The Ashcroft Foundation Gala was always a spectacle. High ceilings, silver linens, a guest list of donors who could fund a hospital wing with a signature. I hadn't planned on attending until the director personally reached out, asking if I'd speak on behalf of Virentech's latest community initiative. I said yes, not because I needed the exposure, but because I finally felt like I could step into the light without pretending to be anyone else. I wore a navy suit, classic and clean. No tie, no flash. Confidence doesn't need accessories. At my side was Emery, a quiet, soft-spoken architect with warm hands and a sharper mind. We weren't anything serious, yet, but there was something steady in his presence, something gentle. He didn't orbit me. He stood beside me. We were just finishing a conversation with a group from the board when I saw Brandon. He was standing by the far wall, dressed in black. No date, no entourage, just a glass of something untouched in his hand. His posture was composed, but his eyes betrayed him. They landed on me like a gasp, and they stayed. I met his gaze across the sea of motion and light, and in that instant, everything went still. Not because I still loved him, but because I finally didn't. Nodded once, polite, unreadable, then turned to Emery and said something I don't even remember. He laughed, and we kept walking, past Brandon, past the weight of what we once were, toward the place where the music was louder and the night felt alive. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. because I could feel it. The way his eyes followed me, like someone remembering a name they used to whisper in the dark. Later that night, as the gala wound down and I stood outside beneath the pale moonlight, Emery excused himself to take a call. I leaned against the stone banister, fingers tracing the edge of my glass, breathing in the cool night air. A quiet voice startled me. "I always thought you were playing small," Brandon said behind me. "Turns out, you were just waiting for the right time." I turned slowly. He stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets now, coat draped over one arm. His hair was shorter, his eyes older. "You were wrong about a lot of things," I said calmly. He looked down, nodding. "I know." I studied him, not as the man I had once loved, but as someone I used to be. "I thought you were safe," he admitted. "Steady, kind, but not exciting, not ambitious. I thought someone like Dominic would take me higher." "And did he?" I asked. He gave a small, broken laugh. "For a while. Then he let me fall alone." I nodded. That's what illusions do. We stood in silence for a moment, nothing left to pretend about. "I see you now," Brandon said, his voice softer. "I finally do." And maybe he did. But that version of me, the man who once waited for scraps of his affection, was gone. The man standing here had built himself in quiet hours, in boardrooms and broken nights, in the absence of the love he once begged for. He hadn't seen me when it mattered. And now, he couldn't reach me. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said gently. Brandon's mouth parted like he wanted to say something more, but he didn't. I turned and walked away, my footsteps echoing softly against the stone as I moved toward the future, not the past. We left a few minutes later. Emery took my hand in the car without saying a word. The city shimmered beyond the glass like a promise. And as I looked out at the skyline, everything I once feared losing felt like a story I could finally set down. Because some people leave for the version of you they imagine, but I had become something real, not to prove anything, just to live. He left for money. I became the man he was chasing, and when he finally saw me, it was already too late.